Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Greetings, everyone. I hope you had a good session. Recharged on uplifted states of mind. So we hear a lot with respect to meditation, with respect to spirituality, development of mind. A lot of people talk about the present moment, being in the here and now. So today we'll listen to what the Buddha had to say in one of the suttas. Talks about it many times, but we'll pick up one sutta where this is the central theme. This is from the middle length discourses of the Buddha, the Majjhima Nikaya. This is sutta number 131, Bhaddekaratta Sutta. A single excellent night. So we'll start with the sutta as always, and then we'll have a discussion on it. MN131, Bhaddekaratta Sutta. A single excellent night. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindik's park. There he addressed the bhikkhus thus: Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied, the Blessed One said this: Bhikkhus, I shall teach you the summary and exposition of one who has had a single excellent night. Listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, the bhikkhus replied. The Blessed One said this: let not a person revive the past or on the future build his hopes. For the past has been left behind and the future has not been reached. Instead, with insight, let him see, each presently at his own state. Let him know that and be sure of it, invincibly, unshakably. Today the effort must be made. Tomorrow death may come, who knows? No bargain with mortality can keep him and his hordes away. But one who dwells thus, ardently, relentlessly, by day, by night, it is he, the peaceful sage, has said, who has had a single excellent night. How, bhikkhus, does one revive the past? One nurtures delight there, thinking, I had such material form in the past. One nurtures delight there, thinking, I had such feeling in the past. One nurtures delight there, thinking, I had such perception in the past. One nurtured delight there, thinking, I had such formations in the past. One nurtures delight there, thinking, I had such consciousness in the past. That is how one revives the past. And how, bhikkhus, does one not revive the past? One does not nurture delight there, thinking, I had such material form in the past. One does not nurture delight there, thinking, I had such feeling in the past. One does not nurture delight there, thinking, I had such perception in the past. One does not nurture delight there, thinking, I had such formations in the past. One does not nurture delight there, thinking, I had such consciousness in the past. That is how one does not revive the past. And how, bhikkhus, does one build up hope upon the future? One nurtures delight there, thinking, may I have such material form in the future. One nurtures delight there, thinking, may I have such feeling in the future. One nurtures delight there, thinking, may I have such perception in the future. One nurtures delight there, thinking, may I have such formations in the future. One nurtures delight there, thinking, may I have such consciousness in the future. That is how one builds up hope upon the future. And how, bhikkhus, does one not build up hope upon the future? One does not nurture delight there, thinking, may I have such material form in the future. One does not nurture delight there, thinking, may I have such feeling in the future. One does not nurture delight there, thinking, may I have such perception in the future. One does not nurture delight there, thinking, may I have such formations in the future. One does not nurture delight there, thinking, may I have such consciousness in the future. That is how one does not build up hope upon the future. And how, bhikkhus, is one vanquished in regard to presently arisen states? Here, bhikkhus, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their dhamma, who has no regard for true men and is unskilled and undisciplined in their dhamma, regards material form as self, or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. He regards feeling as self, perception of self as self, formations as self, consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. That is how one is vanquished in regard to presently arisen states. And how, bhikkhus, is one invincible in regard to presently arisen states? Here, bhikkhus, a well taught noble disciple who has regard for noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their dhamma, who has regard for true men and is skilled and disciplined in their dhamma, does not regard material form as self or self as possessed of material form, or material form as in self or self as in material form, does not regard feeling as self or self as possessed of feeling, or feeling as in self or self as in feeling, does not regard formations as self or self as possessed of formations, or formations as in self or self as in formation, does not regard consciousness as self or self as possessed of consciousness, or consciousness as in self or self as in consciousness. That is how one is invincible in regard to presently arisen state. Let not a person revive the past, or on the future build his hopes. For the past has been left behind, and the future has not been reached. Instead, with insight, let him see each presently at his own state. Let him know that and be sure of it, invincibly, unshakably. Today the effort must be made. Tomorrow death may come. Who knows? No bargain with mortality can keep him and his hordes away. But one who dwells thus ardently, relentlessly by day, by night. It is he, the peaceful sage, has said, who has had a single excellent night. So it was with reference to this that it was said, Bhikkhus, I shall teach you the summary and exposition of one who has had a single excellent night. That is what the Blessed One said. Bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Short sutta brings together two key themes. One is a theme of the past, the present, and the future, and the theme of the aggregates, the five aggregates, and the relation to self. So, understanding non self with regards to the five aggregates. So, who here has can claim that they've spent a day without thinking about the past or the future? Please raise your hand. I'd be very happy to hear from you. Yes, and the Buddha literally says that one who is not obsessed with the past or with the future is one who's had a single excellent night. There is a peace, there is a happiness to be found in embracing the present, embracing the reality as it is completely, embracing, seeing it, understanding it, and responding to it in a wholesome way. Also touches upon one of the themes we discussed in our last session together from the Upajjhatthana Sutta, which is from the Anguttara Nikaya 5.57, the Five Remembrances. I will just read a small excerpt from it because that will connect with what we just discussed in the sutta today. A woman or a man, this is the fifth remembrance. A woman or a man, a householder or one gone forth, should often reflect thus. I am the owner of my kamma, the heir of my kamma. I have kamma as my origin, kamma as my relative, kamma as my resort. I will be the heir of whatever kamma, good or bad, that I do. I might repeat it again if required, but this is very relevant to the sutta we discussed. So let's take a step back, right? So obviously, since the Buddha is warning us against spending too much time obsessing about the past or the future, so we do see that we do have this kind of a tendency to obsess about the past or obsess about the future. So let's look at a couple of things. One, why do we do this? And secondly, why is this potentially harmful? We do understand, even this line seems to indicate I'm the heir of my kamma from the other sutta. Anything good or bad that I do, I will be the heir of that. I am born of this kamma, owner of this kamma is my resort, kamma is my relative. So why not think of the past and the future? If you toss up something vertically up, if I toss this pen up, vertically, it's going to land on me. It's not going to land on someone else. So, how do we understand the idea of self with respect to past and future? How do we understand why this obsession with the past and future happens? And how do we actually understand how it should affect our actions in the present? So, those are some of the themes I'll just tease upon. I don't want to make too much of an exposition on it. I just want to tease some thoughts and ideas, and then we should have a collective discussion on this. Right? So, if you've heard any of my previous talks, one of the things I talk about is the fact that the mind acts as a prediction engine. So, there is a very famous quote by a mathematician, philosopher, Alfred North Whitehead, who said, the purpose of thinking, I'm paraphrasing it, the purpose of thinking is to let our ideas die instead of ourselves. So, we can think about a lot of futures, a lot of options, a lot of ways to do things, and then decide what is a reasonable action to actually take. At any point of time, we have multiple possibilities in front of us. And what he says is, if you're going to do something foolish, let that be thwarted in the idea stage instead of actually acting upon it. So the mind acts always as a prediction engine. At any point of time, we are trying to process all the information that is coming in from our different sense channels. So we have 6 channels or bases for our experience, right? The eye, the ear, the nose, the body, the mind, and uh, this allows us to understand what's happening in the environment. We live today in a fairly safe and stable environment, but the way we have evolved is in an environment which is extremely complex and which has always been full of threats as well as opportunities. The ability to take signals from the environment as well as signals in the mind, thoughts that are coming in, and try to understand what is the best next step to take. To if you hear a sound that something that sounds like a branch that is large branch that is falling off the tree, it makes sense to get away from that spot. Or if you hear a rustle in the bushes, which could be a predator, it makes sense to pay close attention and take action, run, get up a tree, or fight, depending on what you think the predator. So, this ability to predict, to make sense of what's happening around us, and to predict what's happening next has been essential to survive. So, if we did not have that ability to predict what's going to happen next, even creatures, small creatures that don't even have a separate brain, they can be tested. So, sea slugs, for example, if you start, there have been experiments where they've been slightly electrocuted after a certain cue. After a certain thing happens, in a few seconds, they will get electrocuted. And in some time, they learn as if this thing happens, this cue happens, then I should curl up and assume a defensive posture because the next thing that is likely to happen is that I will be given an electric shock, right? So prediction is part of what we do. And how do we predict? We predict by reducing the environment into models in our mind. So what is happening? So a certain type of sound represents a branch that may be falling down. A certain type of movement in the bush might represent an animal that is over there, right? So we create models. This is sangya or perception. Vigyan or consciousness allows us to make sense of the environment, process the information that is coming in from the environment, and model it into our concepts or perception, the sangya, to make sense of what is happening in the world. This whole action is colored by our past experiences. So, an animal, for example, which sees a trap set by a hunter for the first time, might naively get caught in it. If somehow it escapes, the next time the same kind of scenario comes in front of it, it will be much more careful because now it is embedded in its sanskar, in its formations, and thereby it has modified its perceptions as well as its consciousness. So the way it will respond to that situation will change completely. This tells us that it is also important to continuously learn from the past experiences. That for a being to survive, for any being to survive, it needs to learn from past experiences. It cannot just make predictions on the future without experience in the past. So that is how our prediction engine works. It experiences something, sees what we did, sees whether the experience itself was harmful or helpful, sees whether the actions that we took were harmful or helpful, and then embeds it within its mind so that it can be used for future scenarios. And that's how learning happens. We are always trying to predict what's going to happen in the future and take actions according to that. And this is important. This is important for survival, even if we are not living in the jungle, right? So if we are crossing the street and we have a sense of what it sounds like that to hear a vehicle that is approaching us at a high speed, we can use that experience, we can use that understanding to make the decision not to cross the road at that instant, right? So we let our idea die instead of ourselves, even though we are not actively thinking about it. So that's how the past, present, and future continuously work. What happens with humans, so with us, is that we have an extremely rich repository of memory, rich ways of thinking about what's happened in the past, everything that we learn in the past, in the present, every new perception that we add, concept that we add to our mind, every change that happens in our consciousness, the way we perceive things, the way we process information, all of that can be applied to understand the past in a very different way. So we have this extremely capable, extremely powerful machinery in our heads. It's the prefrontal cortex, which is primarily responsible for going way back in the memory and way back in the future. And we can plan not just to avoid getting eaten by a predator in the moment or getting struck by a falling branch, but we can start planning for things that will happen 10 years, 15 years, 20. The problem is that we are typically terrible at it. Research shows that our ability to predict beyond the extreme short term is gets poorer and poorer because we live in a very complex and changing world, right? But given this understanding that the past affects how we navigate the present and how we might experience the future, we can become fearful or we can become attached to certain things that have happened in the past, certain things that are happening in the future. So, what we need to look at is something that's happened in the past. Is it teaching me a lesson that is applicable for the action that I'm about to perform right now? Does my past instruct the actions that I'm about to perform right now? And does my ability to think about the future instruct the action I'm able to about to perform right now? That is all we need to think. But what we do is we often get swayed by getting obsessed with the past. Either it could be something pleasant where we start thinking about an experience that we liked, that we cherished, get attached to it, or we start thinking about an experience that we disliked and get attached to it, feeling, trying to understand why that happened, why it happened to me, etc. We get attached to these kind of things. And same with the future. We can start fantasizing about something good that we think can happen or that we want to happen, a holiday that you want to take 6 months from now, or a retirement plan that you have, or something that you want to purchase in a year's time. You can start get completely attached to it and completely absorbed with it, or you can look at something that is worrisome, that you're afraid of, something happening, disease, loss of people, loss of employment, things like that that you can think about and get obsessed with that. The reason for this is we are able to perceive, place the sense of self that we have, the sense of self that is not even a real, eternal, permanent self that we have in the present, we are able to place this sense of self in the past and this sense of self in the future. So, unless we learn in the present moment that this is just a sense of self, anything that we're experiencing, anything, the material form that we have, concepts that are going through our mind to make sense of the environment, of the world, of the universe, of our lives, the way we process information, the tendencies that we have, the impressions that we have that we carry from our childhood and from our lives. All of those things are just coming together to help you create a sense of self that can take action in the moment. As soon as we start treating this as a permanent, eternal self, in the moment we become subject to craving and clinging. And the same craving and clinging, which traps us into thinking that whatever is happening right now is happening to me. It is not an experience that I'm having, but it is happening to me. It is not an experience that is occurring in my awareness, but it is happening to me, to myself. And to think of things as mine, placing attachment on different experiences, different objects. And the same thing we transport to the past, we transport to the future. As soon as we do that, as soon as we collapse the world as something that is happening to me, that has happened to me, or that will happen to me, nothing else takes precedence over that. And you can continue to be completely absorbed in it, completely obsessed over it, and become a victim to obsessing over the past or obsessing over the future. So that's what the Buddha warns about. One thing to understand is, like I said, the past informs the understanding of the past informs the actions that we take right. The understanding of the future informs the action that we take right now. We are the heirs of karma or action that we have performed in the past. We will be the heirs of karma that we are performing in the present. Right. So what we need to understand is the only thing that is available to us is the karma that we have in this instant. Can our past inform us to perform this karma without craving, without creating the suffering of oneself or others? Can we create it from the base of a wholesome, uplifted mind, which is free of craving and clinging, and which will teach our mind that it is possible not to be always caught in that story of I, me, myself, and mine, whether it is the present or the past or the future. When we see things clearly right here, right now, which is what the Buddha says, and which is what he advises, should be done relentlessly, ardently. We are seeing the world without craving and clinging. We are not seeing the world as something that is happening to me, but we are aware of events that are happening in our experience. We are aware of the ability that we have to influence things, and we are able to make choices, whether it is mental actions, verbal actions, or physical actions that are wholesome and helpful to us as well as others, because we are acting with a mind free of craving. And that's what the Buddha's exhorting us. Like I said, it is very closely related to the fifth remembrance. I am the owner of my karma, the heir of my karma. I have karma as my origin, karma as my relative, karma as my resort. I will be the heir of whatever karma, good or bad, that I do. And the only way to perform karma that has wholesome results is to perform that karma from a mind that is based in wholesome states. And the only way to do that is to get rid of craving and clinging. Use the 6 hours, release any craving and clinging. Recognize if your mind is caught up in a thought with a base of craving, wanting something outcome out of it, predicating your happiness on that outcome. I will be happy if this happens. I will be unhappy if this happens. I like this. I want more of this. I'll be happy if I get more of this. I don't like this. I want less of this. I will be happy only if I have less of this. I like this. If I don't get this, I will be unhappy. I dislike this. If I get this, I will be unhappy. So as soon as we are able to recognize that our mind is caught up in something, some chain of thought with this kind of thinking, let it be. Understand that it is just a thought. It is not that I that is trapped there. It is a thought, or it's an experience that is happening in your awareness. It is not you that is caught up in that situation. That situation is of your own mind's. Let that thought be. Relax the tension and tightness, which automatically lets go of the craving and clinging, which makes you that small person whose happiness is completely tied to the outcomes of their interaction with the world. When you relax, you also learn, you teach your mind to be able to do this when it is related to things in the past or things in the future. Re-smiles. Start your journey towards an uplifted state of mind and return to an uplifted state. If you're practicing to whatever your object of meditation is, if you're involved, if you're responding to a situation, come back to that situation with an uplifted mind, free of craving, and respond to that. And keep repeating this every time you find your mind caught up with clinging and craving. One last point I just wanted to share is the fact that thoughts of the past and thoughts of the future come up are also part of your present. So it is not useful to get mortified or feel that you have failed because a thought of the past came or a thought of the future came up. Your mind is continuously learning how to make better decisions, and you have to allow it to do that. The danger is collapsing into the past or the future with craving and clinging, regarding that you are a self that has had certain experiences in the past, or regarding your a self that is there in the future and that wants to have certain experiences, and taking the same thought process of craving and clinging. I was happy because this happened. I was unhappy because this happened. I will be happy only if this happens. I will be unhappy if something else happens. Right. So getting out of that loop and seeing what is the action that is available to us that is most wholesome. Allow the past and future to instruct you to make better decisions that are wholesome, but not to enslave you by trapping you in a sense of self in the past or in the future. So that's how I understand the Buddha's words in this sutta. I have touched upon a lot of topics. Some of it might have set off some thinking in your minds. Happy to hear any thoughts, comments, questions.
Hello, Rajiv. Hi.
Hello, Albert.
Hello. I had a question. When in, let's say, daily life, and you know, I get caught up, and something happens, I take it as, oh, it's happening to me, or in such a way. Does thinking in a way, let's say, um, in a way, like in the formula, for example, like this is not mine, this is not happening to a eternal self, or this is more like an experience. Does this support a 6R process?
Yes, absolutely. So being attached personally, right? This is mine, this is me. So what happens is, and you will observe this, right? So the craving and clinging makes that sense of self, you collapse into that sense of self. So anytime something is happening in your experience, a thought is coming, or you're experiencing something through the other sense channels, an experience is happening, then we start to add meaning to that experience, which is rooted in a sense of self, right? So you have the So you see a desert, right? And you have a sense of self that says, I want it. I'll be happy only if I want it. You have another sense of self that comes up and says, if I have it, I'm going to get sleepy after it. I'm going to have a sugar rush and then I'm going to crash, or this is not good for my health. So, different stimuli in the environment, they are setting off this sense of self. This sense of self is part very much downstream from things happening in your experience. Something happens in your experience, and to make sense of it, the mind is a prediction model, right? And the fastest way it makes sense of things is by collapsing it into a self. This is happening to me, right? So that makes you immediately react in a very, very different way, in a fearful way, in a desperate. Someone drives past you violently, right? And you feel this is happening to me. Maybe they are, you don't know, maybe that person is someone with poor manners or poor road etiquette, or it may be somebody heading for an emergency. You don't have all the information available, but your mind collapses all the, there is too much information in the environment, right? So your mind is always being very reductive. It is compressing things to the least point at which it can take the next action or take some decision. So we are always, that is where prejudices come from. So if you're walking down a dark alley and you glance and you see somebody who's behind you. So depending on their gender, their age, their size, their race, you might have different emotions that are coming up, which has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with thoughts that are in your mind, experiences that you have, right? But the way you react in that moment will be as if this is the reality, this is the self that is happening, and it is useful. So when you are crossing the road, you cannot take the time to calculate the physics of that vehicle approaching you and the probability of your body withstanding that kind of an impact. So that sense of self that appears is immediately useful in the short term, but during that point you're trapped in that sense of self, whereas you have different senses of self that are coming up at all points of time in the day. What happens when we start going into different situations is this sense of self can become injurious to you and to another. You get into an argument, right? After a while, you are only arguing in service of that sense of self. You are not having a discussion that can lead to better learning and better outcomes for you and the other person. You're calling the other person names. You're indulging in straw man arguments, what aboutery, just to make a point, just to win that argument. It is just about that sense of self and the kind of almost animalistic behavior that the sense of self is rooted in, right? That all I need to do is I need to treat the situation with the same urgency that I would treat a predator or treat a competitor when I'm getting to get some going to get some food. So that comes over you, and immediately as soon as the craving is let go with respect to that situation, you assume a different personality, right? You might be have an argument and you go home and you are greeted by a child or your pet and you may soften, right? Or you may continue to take it out on them as well. The next day you soften and then you have a very different experience. So as soon as you relax, the relax step, the release, relax, and restart, all these three steps are instrumental in letting go of craving and clinging and stopping you from being trapped in that thought process of this is me, this is mine, this is myself. Because you understand that whatever is coming up, that sense of self is supposed to be of service to you. It is supposed to help you navigate the moment better. It is supposed to help you perform more wholesome actions in that moment. But unfortunately, because we have spent a lot of time, a lot in our life before we, encounter the Dhamma, before we start understanding this, we have taken decisions based on craving and clinging. We have taken decisions which, in that moment, the action is completely directed towards what will make me, what I feel will make me happy or not make me happy. And none of that lasts. None of that, any decision that you took that was harmful to yourself or to others, thinking that this will make you happy, may have given you a brief spike of pleasure, but it doesn't serve to really make you happy. And those habits are very hardwired. So every time we use the 6 hours and we perform an action that is based in a wholesome state of mind, we are changing that wiring slowly. Instead of being trapped in that sense of self, you understand this is the situation, this is what is happening, what is the most wholesome and appropriate action to do. So, in fact, the word samyak or samma, that is precedes all the elements of the eightfold path, it does not actually mean right, it means appropriate, right? So it samma vayama, what is commonly translated as right effort, it means appropriate or harmonious application or practice, right? So what we are saying is, can we act in harmony with everyone around the sentient beings that are all prone to suffering, that are all subject to suffering? Can we perform an action that is reduces suffering for us and for other people? And we are slowly rewiring our mind not to collapse into that very fearful, desperate sense of self, animalistic sense of self that is in competition with the world, that is trying to grab something before somebody else does, but instead act from a different place. Because that grabbing doesn't lead us to any lasting pleasure. In fact, sets us up for disappointment. Because when we grab something, we are inherently assuming that whatever we grabbed, whatever we took, or whatever we pushed away, that action will lead us to lasting happiness. And that belief is always failing continuously. And this is what leads to the Buddha talks about three types of dukkha. I think I mentioned it in the last talk too. So one of the types of dukkha is so the three types that the Buddha talks about is dukkha dukkha, uh, direct experience of mental or physical pain, viparinam dukkha, which means suffering or pain caused by unexpected outcomes. So this unexpected outcomes, you're expecting something to happen and it doesn't happen. So there is a pain associated with that. So when we become completely collapsed in the like or dislike of something, take an action, unwholesome action in service of that, and we still find that the results are not what we want, that leads to viparinam. And the repetition of this in every instant that our mind is gripped by craving and thinking leads to a baseline fatigue with respect to life, baseline irritation that things never seem to work out because we think that achieving certain goals, going after everything we like, pushing away everything we don't like is what is going to bring us happiness. And the path to that is simply using the 6 hours, letting go of that craving and clinging, and there is no conflict. There is nothing you like that needs to happen and your happiness is predicated on that. There is nothing you dislike that you need to go away and your happiness is predicated upon that. You're just happy in the here and now just by virtue of having a uplifted state of mind that you're able to cultivate on demand, right? And most of the rumination of the past and the future also comes because of this absence of happiness in the present moment. There is an internal belief in the mind that if we examine the past hard enough, get lost in it enough, maybe we'll find out the secret to happiness. Or if we plan hard enough, we will finally create a route to happiness. And unfortunately, our ability to predict is not that long. We are not alone in the universe. We have to deal with billions of sentient beings that are pursuing their own agenda. And things will always be in flux. Impermanence is there. Things are always dependent on conditions. As soon as they change, we are liable to undergo suffering and disappointment. Instead, if we train our mind to be happy in the instant, we don't go obsessing over the past, we don't go obsessing over the future, we embrace reality with a smile. And that's the first thing that you need to do continuously, smile.
Thank you. That was very nice. A different, also something about this sutta is the Buddha is basically asking something very simple, but no one could raise their hand when you ask that question, of course, because it's quite difficult to do if you're not trained. It is.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. So this is the thing is, and I've mentioned this before, and this is something to embrace, right? So we are actually working against, so a lot of people argue that everything that is natural is good, right? And that is unfortunately not correct because it is natural for us to be angry and do unwholesome things. It is not outside of nature. People give examples of animals living in harmony. Animals do not live in harmony. They live in terror. They inflict violence upon each other. They cannibalize at times. Every kind of thing happens in animals, and in fact, it is our evolution from that state that has hardwired these kind of things within us. So everything that is natural is not necessarily going to lead you to happiness, right? And we are literally going against our natural hardwired wiring, and that cannot happen through intuition. That has happened once to the Buddha, and I would not bet that we are the next person that's going to happen without instruction, right? So it's better to use the instruction and test it for yourself. Always test it for yourself. Am I feeling that difference right now? Does the same situation completely change when you use the 6 hours, when you identify the craving and clinging, when you let go of the craving and clinging? Does it change your ability to respond immediately? Does it change your experience of that situation immediately? One must test this, try this, and only once you have confidence, you invest more and more time. Once you understand that no amount of planning, no amount of ruminating in the past or planning for the future is actually going to lead to happiness, right? So you do the amount of planning that you need to perform actions in the present, to take wholesome actions that are going to result in less suffering for yourself and others. But anything else beyond that, you plan and you predicate your happiness on that, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Cool. Thanks. I,
Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments, anything that from your experience that you got reminded of, any experience you would like to share that you used to think a lot about in the past or in the future, and over time you maybe had a different insight into it? Happy to hear. It's an opportunity for everyone to learn and reflect, because everyone brings in a very, very unique perspective of the world and of the Dhamma. So please, I would request more people to come up and share. Yes, May.
Thank you, Rajiv ji, for sharing this sutta again today. Just a small comment. I think this sutta is a useful reminder for us to know that, nothing in the future is fixed. No matter what we experience now or in the past. So I think there's a saying or something, I can't remember the exact words, but it's like our future is in the palm of our hands, or something like along those lines. So in other words, really, what we think, what we do, what we say, what, apart from being owner of that, really determines what will happen next. And so I guess it's, in a sense, gives us the opportunity to see life in a positive mindset, not like surrendering to, just what may happen. I guess that's just a small comment to share.
Yes, I think that's a great comment, May, and that is why I also shared the portion on karma, right? So a lot of times when we are learning these things, for the first time, uh, it might seem okay. Don't think about the past. Don't think about the future, and just be with the present. It doesn't mean that we are simply passive, right? So it is so like you mentioned, right? So actions that you take today are important. It's not just about surrendering, right? And you have that agency, and that is why I think the point on karma is very important. That at any point of time you can be actively involved. This is very important even more important for lay people, because there are a lot of responsibilities, there are a lot of contracts, social as well as professional, that you have to be part of it. And I find a lot of people, sometimes they come across the teachings and they tend to feel that, okay, I'm caught in something that is not wholesome, but I can't put on the ropes as well, and they get stuck in this bit of a limbo. The point is, like, and at this point of time, what can you do, which is the most useful, which is to experience reality without craving and clinging, and perform wholesome actions that bring about the least suffering, right? So as you keep doing that, you start changing your mind, and you find a different way to you can be as active as before, with completely different mindset and relationship to how you're experiencing life. Anyone else? How are you, Hugh?
I'm very good, Rajiv. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry I missed the first half of the talk, and I apologise for the background noise here, but I'm just got some cooking going on. The other aspect, I think, which comes through from this particular sutta, and also this idea of past and future, is the temptation we have, and I think a lot of secular mindfulness goes this way, of saying, if you just stay in the present moment, then the impact of the past and the future doesn't appear, because you're not engaging. But the difficulty there is the fact that it's all about context. The experience is all about the context. So we have to understand where we come from, even if it's in the present time, and where our actions are taking us. Because without that context, we don't understand the choices that we have and the impact they have. And so there are a lot of sort of mindfulness exercises and mindfulness apps and such like, which encourages us to come into the present moment. And often that's done in terms of body sensation or sensor awareness, and we come into just hear what's there now, and this takes us out of this engagement with the past and the future, which is very important if we've got over involved. But if we're not careful, it becomes a place of respite rather than a place of understanding. And so this is why I think the description of dukkha that you gave, or the three types of dukkha, is very important, because we only begin to understand that mechanism, particularly the dukkha which isn't about a pain, the context that we experience the dukkha in, it helps us explain where we have a choice. And it's understanding that choice which is the most valuable lesson, if you like, that we have, because then it invites us to understand that process in more detail. And that's the dependent origination that the Buddha said that was necessary to see. So that's what comes through from this sutta that I hadn't heard your explanation today because I wasn't there, but in the past, I think it encourages to see it in that way, but it can be overread sometimes as come out of the past, come out of the future, and just be here right now.
Right. Thank you. That's a very, very valuable reflection, right? So that's something I was talking, I think, possibly before you joined, was that there is no need to be revulsed by thoughts of the past and the future, right? The problem in this sutta also, the Buddha talks clearly, is about getting trapped in that sense of self with regard to the past, or the sense of self with regard to the future, taking things personally in the past or the future, right? So that obsession, that craving and clinging based thinking about the past and future is a problem. And absolutely, thoughts of the past and thoughts of the future are mind objects that are coming up in the present. So they are part of the present. So even if you were to rigorously apply the idea of being very, very present, those are things that are happening in the present. You will never win a fight with reality is, I think, what we need to understand and to embrace it. So thanks for highlighting that point. I think there is a lot of people, tend to get caught in that trap, and it's again that's also the reason why for me, the fifth remembrance that I repeated a bunch of times today, it stands out a lot because even in the present, that we do need that understanding that we are the heirs of our karma, and karma is our origin and relative and resort, and we will be the heir and owner of our karma going forward. So the past and the future allow us to actually use our experience to make better decisions and anticipate what consequences we are about to unleash, and make better choices that way. So just rephrasing what you mentioned. But great. So I think we can take one last comment or thought, and then we will wrap up today's session with the sharing of merit. Okay. So if there's nothing, just one reminder to all of us, right? So all of lot of, especially for people that anybody who's recently started to practice, and a great reminder for people who've been practicing for a while as well, that eventually none of the intellectual understanding of the Dhamma is going to help too much unless there is a experiential living of the Dhamma, right? And it starts with the smile. It starts with using the 6 hours as often as possible. And I really mean as often as possible, because the number of times your mind will experience craving and clinging in a day is innumerable, right? So, and it is not just with respect to one thought, but it is respect to every moment of that thought, being attached to that situation, taking things personally, every moment you are caught up in craving and clinging, it is teaching your mind lessons that have not in the past brought sustained happiness, right? And every time you use the 6 hours, you learn a method that will bring sustained happiness. And it all just comes down to that. Keep smiling and use the 6 hours as often as possible. Just see every situation in a different light before responding to it. And that will create a lot of internal awareness of the pitfalls of craving and clinging, taking things personally, and the benefits of acting with a wholesome mind at any point of time. And maybe all have one excellent night as Buddha taught. Thank you, everyone. I'll just share merits, and we'll end the session. I'll share the screen so you can see. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving share all grief, and may all beings find it. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Wishing you a lovely week, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.